Do you have a story to share with the world? Of course you do. We all have stories to share. An Anchor podcast allows you to share your interests in a way that connects to others all across the globe. If you have been considering starting your own podcast and don't know where to begin, Anchor makes it easy to record, edit, and publish with the click of a button. You can even add music. Whether it's crime dramas, self-improvement, paranormal adventures, or tips about parenting, you too can share your unique imprint on the world. Download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started today. You've got this. I believe in you. Welcome to the Existential Empath Podcast. My name is Tanya, and I am an intuitive empath. My intention is to share valuable tools and techniques that I have learned so you can tap into your own inner healer naturally and intuitively. Welcome back, everyone. I have guest Amanda Kate here with me today. Amanda is a kinesiologist, life coach, mentor, and author of Divine.Messy.Human. Welcome, Amanda. I'm really excited to have you on the show today.
Oh, thank you so much, Tanya. It's such an honor to be here.
So you and I have very similar timelines that we've kind of lived on. And when I was reading your story, I was like, wow, this actually is kind of reflecting back to me what my story, looked like working in corporate America, suffering a lot of burnout, having a lot of pain in my body, searching for answers, and then finding ourselves guided to what's known as kinesiology. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the healing art of kinesiology, and we're going to dive a little bit into how we can prioritize our internal truth over our external influence. So, Amanda, if you want to start a little bit with just share your story and what kind of led you to even learning about kinesiology, and then we can go into what that is.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what you say is really interesting that, our stories have mirrored. I always say my story is not that extraordinary because it's happening to so many people. It's only extraordinary for me because it happened to me. But there are so many people that are set up to believe that the type of life I was living and you were living was normal. And that comes through obviously a patriarchal society. It comes through this, idea of competition and that success is only money-based and, all of these societal norms that we've got. And then you've got the religious overtone, obviously, sometimes with the guilt and the shame and this idea of a vengeful God, going to rain down fire and brimstone if we don't behave, and all of this kind of stuff going on. And I think all of those things shape us into these tightly bound people who think that there's, one formula for success or one formula for life.
Or even healthcare for that matter, right?
Yeah. Oh, exactly. I mean, I don't even think health comes into it. I think we are trained to be robots who go through life in one specific formula, and it's go to school, go to high school, get good grades, go to university, graduate from, if we're privileged enough, obviously, to go to university. For some people, it's, get a job and start working or whatever. Then it's, find your partner, get married, have your couple of kids or whatever it is, buy your house. And and that's it. Maybe get a dog, or whatever. And then, you retire and job's done. And I followed that. I was a white, middle class, Church of England raised, female or Anglican. And it's, I did what all the tick boxes were to be that good girl, to make my parents happy, to, make sure that they weren't angry at me. And, I was ridiculously goody two-shoes at school. I did not want to break the rules. I know my parents were loving and they were so kind and they're so generous and they're wonderful people, but I was terrified of putting a foot wrong. And I know that story came from me. That's, not their influence, but I was terrified to put a foot wrong. I felt huge disappointment anytime I let them down. And so I was already heading towards adrenal burnout back then in primary school, high school, because I was so busy walking this tiny thin line of what it meant to be a good girl. And so I didn't hang out with the wrong people at school. I was very careful about, who I talked to, what I did. I made sure I got good grades. I knuckled down and, I did the right thing in inverted commas because,
At the
it
time.
wasn't for me at the time. Exactly. And then, I went to university and I actually had glandular fever just before my exams in year 12. Now, for those people who don't really know, glandular fever is caused by Epstein-Barr virus, and often it is caused by people who live those types of life. It presents in people who are trying to toe that line, who are trying to, live to external, expectations. And so I had that come up. And also for those who understand Epstein-Barr, it also comes back often in life as chronic fatigue.
Yeah, and it also
And
presents many
so,
other viruses as well.
oh, doesn't
A
it though? But,
plethora of them.
and it does. Oh, Hashimoto's can be most autoimmune can often be
Yeah.
Epstein-Barr stuff coming back. And so, already before I'd even finished high school, I was having those sort of signs that I was that type of personality that was going to get burned out because I was so busy on this treadmill trying to please everybody else. And so then, went to high school, ended up working for my dad for a bit, and then my sister had gone overseas and got me to go travel with her for a little bit. So I moved over to the UK, and again, then I went a bit mad, partied really probably too hard, because again, it was the first time I was let out of this box. So I'd never been able to practice with boundaries before. So all of a sudden I'm in a place where there are none. And, I did what most kids do once they go from complete restriction to freedom. And I went the pendulum swung the other way, and that wasn't healthy either. And so then I ended up meeting, who was to become my husband, and things weren't great from the beginning. Like, we would fight and all of this sort of stuff, but he was rich, he was successful, he was the type of man that you choose as a husband, and things were good enough. But also I was already in trauma because I was separated from my family, and, my friends were constantly leaving and I didn't know who I was and all of that sort of stuff. And so with somebody showering you with attention, you sort of go, okay, maybe this is what I'm supposed to be looking for. So anyway, we got married quite quickly because, again, it was either I had to leave and go back to Australia or we had to get married. So we were married within 14 months, which again, hindsight says big mistake. But and then he started pressuring for children, and I was like, okay, look, if we're going to do this, I want to do it before I'm 30 because I want a chance of getting my body back. Nice selfish aim there. And so we did. I had my babies at 27 and 29. So 2 kids and a husband by the time I was 30. And there was a time there where I didn't want any of that stuff.
Yeah.
So it was like, whoa, okay, what's going on here? And then, things were great when he wasn't home. I loved being a mother. I loved being a mother. I absolutely adored it. And, he'd leave by 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning, and he'd get home maybe 6:30, 7 o'clock at night. So he really didn't see his son because his son would wake up 8:30 most of the time and then, go to bed by 6:30. He was an amazing sleeper. And so, but then, if he did come home in time, he'd come home, wind him up, and then go, here, now you put him to bed. And I'd be like, oh my God. So there was no respect for me and the child's routine and, any of that sort of stuff. And then on the weekends when he was there, I tried to take a little bit of time for me because I was full-time single mum during the week. And he'd go, you're cutting into precious family time. You can't do that. And then all of Saturday afternoon, he'd be out playing football. He'd literally go from 12 till 5. So for 5.5 days a week, I was a single mother.
Wow. So you're already feeling the pressure of you're in a relationship, but it's all you kind of taking care of the children, and which is causing more stress and more adrenal fatigue and just more pressure, societal pressure. And, all of that is just kind of piling up.
My body started basically breaking down slowly. And so I was seeing all sorts of doctors. I was suffering 13 days a month with my menstrual cycle, 6 days around ovulation, and then 7 days of bleeding time. So it was all of the premenstrual symptoms you can think of: sore boobs, headaches, just sluggishness, cravings, blah, 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 all the stuff. And I started with the signs of Hashimoto's disease. I also then injured my foot at the gym, and they thought I had the beginnings of rheumatoid arthritis. So you can see my body's eating itself. They're all autoimmune diseases: chronic fatigue, Hashimoto's, rheumatoid arthritis. And I was getting this really poor health picture. Doctors are like, we've done all your bloods, you're perfectly healthy. And I'm like, I am not perfectly healthy. There is something seriously wrong. Because as you know, doctors look for a marker that says you're not sick. They don't look for a marker that says you are healthy and vital and well. So they're looking at the very bare minimum you need to not need medication, rather than the upper end of the spectrum where you are going to be healthy and vital and buzzing with life. And so my gynecologist tried to put me on antidepressants, and I'm like,
yeah, it's like
red lights flashing up.
Absolutely. You're like, no, there's something deeper. And I think that's where we fall into that prioritizing our inner truth, is that you and I were listening to that when we were going through this, and I kept doing the same. I kept saying, no, I'm not taking these medications. It's something different. It's something deeper. And so, once you started to experience this, what little, kind of ding, ding, ding moments went off that said, I need to look for something else?
Do you know what? Ding, ding, ding moments have been going off my entire life. This is not your life you're living. And I ignored them. That was my first one I listened to, was when they tried to put me on antidepressants for my period. That was really what pushed me down the natural therapies path. So I was seeing a naturopath. I saw a Chinese doctor. I saw all these different professionals, and it took 4 of those professionals to tell me I had chronic fatigue before my ex-husband believed me. Wow. He's like, "Oh, you're exhausted. Everybody else just gets tired, but it's always worse for you." Blah blah blah. He didn't understand what was going on in my body, because the thing is, with the chronic fatigue, some days I was fine. Yeah. I could cope okay, and it was like nothing was wrong. And then I would get hit down, and my muscles would be so heavy they wouldn't work. And people don't understand that with chronic fatigue, that some days you are absolutely fine, and then you just get smacked with a sledgehammer and you can't move.
Oh, terrible. It's Amanda, when I had it, I had to crawl. I would get up in the morning and I'd have to crawl to the bathroom on my hands and knees, and it would take me at least 30 minutes just to get out of bed, because I had to stretch and I had to feel, I was like, I am in such pain, and it was settling in, just complete fatigue. My body was screaming at me every way that it could, but I wasn't listening.
Yeah, absolutely. And so then the real crux sort of came in about the April time, where we went on family holiday and met his brother and sister-in-law and stuff in Brisbane. And I thought we had a great first night, and we came back from that and he just tore strips off me for about 4 hours. He was pacing the room and it was horrible. I've never felt so much anger and disgust come off somebody, and let alone directed to me, who has always tried to look after everybody else. And that was it. I broke. I was this empty shell, or I felt like an empty shell of a human being. Got back, got a mental health care plan, because of course there's something wrong with me. Went to go and see a psychologist. So I rang them, and this particular psychologist worked with mindfulness and assertiveness training and things like that. So I'd booked in for her mindfulness course. But the receptionist, and this is the crux, and we've mentioned it, but this woman asking this question, oh my God. She said to me, okay, so this is end of April. She said, I can't get you in. The next mindfulness course starts end of May. I can't get you in to see the psychologist until the middle of May. You sound really stressed. She said, what's going on for you right now? So I gave the quick brief, download. And she then turned around and said, okay, have you thought about Reiki or kinesiology? And I'm like, well, let's try kinesiology. I've got no idea what it is. And I remember it was the 24th of April in 2015. And I walked in there, and the session just blew my mind. And she said to me, you don't understand how emotionally abused you are, do you? And I went, oh yeah, that makes sense with this person. I could list off a few of my, other significant relationships. And it took me 4 months until about the August, until another friend sat down and went, okay, your marriage is really, really wrong, and you don't realize it because it's your normal.
on you. Yeah.
And so she sat down and went, bang. And I'm like, what do you mean? You know, she had to literally go through, and I'm so glad she was so brave and she did that. She said, your relationship is really messed up and you don't understand it because it's your normal. So let me explain it to you. And I was like, whoa. And then it took me another 4 months to leave.
Wow. So you went through that struggle in that relationship, and then you were introduced to kinesiology. So let's dive into what kinesiology is.
The
so
fun bit, the exciting
fun bit. And and I think it's important that you share your story, because many of us have gone through a very similar situation, whether it's in our marriage, in friendships, in our family dynamics. And we build up this emotional pressure cooker, so to speak, and it creates physical pain in our body. And so I went through similar situation, and when I was led to kinesiology, it was mind blowing for me. So what is kinesiology? For those viewers or listeners who aren't even familiar with this word, what is kinesiology, Amanda?
So kinesiology in the States is much more, well, and here in certain regards, is more about the movement of muscles. So it will be more with your physical therapists or your physiotherapists and your occupational therapists and people like that will study kinesiology, which is the movement of the body. When we're looking at movement in my type of kinesiology, which is applied kinesiology, I do PKP, the specific sort of brand, I guess, of kinesiology I do. It's looking at movement of pretty much everything. It's looking at the biochemical pathways of the body, the way that the body moves physically, the way that the energy is moving, the vibrational movement of the body. So we're literally looking at you as an entire being. And the way I describe this is quantum physicists have proven that the universe is 4% physical matter. So this meat suit that we're walking around in is 4% of the picture, and yet we put 100% of the focus on it until we learn better.
Yes.
And most people might maybe look at it as a 33% in terms of mind, body, spirit. They may do that, but for the most part, I'm looking at it as the 4%. So what's the other bit? It's your energetic, emotional, spiritual, relational, financial, hormonal,
everything.
blah, de, blah, de, blah, all the other bits that make
Anything
up you.
that causes you some sort of emotional distress.
Oh yes,
or
absolutely. Yeah. And when we look at stress, there's three main types of stress. It's physical, chemical, or emotional. And those three stresses can then cause the electrical stress in the body, which means that the messages just are getting scrambled or whatever. You know, it's like ping pong balls just, going mad in a room and no one's there to either hit them or catch them. It's, they're just bouncing around and it's like, I don't know what's going to happen. That's what was happening in my body. And so the way I look at it when I'm working with clients is, we don't know there's a problem until stuff stops happening. So I explain it to people like the computer, and I'm not very computer-like, so I use really basic language. It's like we're collecting all these cookies and malwares and spy bots and all of those things that we get pop-ups for that I don't understand. And they're all happening under the surface, but we don't know there's a problem until we actually can't use that interface.
No, that's a great analogy.
And so we kind of need to go through and clear out what's stopping the machine working. Or if you think about stress in terms of the electrical, or your nervous system in terms of the electrical system of your home, some people in stress, it's like they get caught and everything gets switched on. And they're go, 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 and busy and cooking and cleaning and
autopilot. Yeah.
Yeah, but fast. It's like you are full of coffee, and that's that wired and tired adrenal state where people are just go, 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 go. The other people go into everything gets turned off and they can't function. And it's either flat in bed or on the couch surfing Netflix, and they just don't want to do anything.
And that was me, Amanda. I'd get home from work and I'd get my pajamas at 5:00 and sit on the couch and literally tune myself out into Netflix.
Wow,
I literally had a relationship with Netflix for about 4 months. I mean, it was my boyfriend. I was really in that relationship.
Wow.
But it was my way of disconnecting with the reality that I was living, because my reality was creating so much stress on my nervous system.
Yeah. And so you think about it like a pendulum swing. Now I would swing from one extreme to the other. So I would go from busy, 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 busy. I've just got to fight through this. And if I fight this hard enough, it's not going to be there, to I can't fight this anymore. I can't move.
Yeah.
Busy, 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 nothing. And it's interesting. Yeah. And it's interesting because often those two people are, together in a relationship.
Yes.
So there'll be one doing all the doing and one will be sitting down, and the one who's doing all the doing will be like, you lazy so-and-so, like you're sitting there doing nothing. But they're both in the same stress pattern.
Totally.
Just
and
like
we track that. We manifest the opposite.
Yeah. So again, I look at kinesiology like rewiring that house. So that this, we choose when different switches are on and different appliances are on and all that kind of stuff, because we don't want to be in that situation where we are on the go all the time or we're dead stopped all the time. But that's kind of where our bodies go to with different stresses. And let's just take a little minute to pre-frame trauma as well. And I know trauma is a bit of a buzzword at the moment because of, Dr. Gabor Mate bringing it so to the forefront, which I think his work is incredible, but also with people like Stephen Porges and the polyvagal theory and all of that kind of thing. Traumas don't just have to be, abuse or Holocaust or war victims or sexual survivors or, all the big T traumas. They are also those drops in the bucket. It can be the overly critical parent where you are wound up trying to perfect and please for them. It can be anything that your body does not.
Yeah.
Hell yes. Anything that your body does not process as nourishing and nurturing can be stored in the body as a trauma, depending on how we react to it and how it reacts within us. Mm-hmm. And so it's just really important, because I had a client who came into me and she's like, I had loving parents and I had this, and like I had a pretty good childhood, but her parents were overly critical and she didn't understand the trauma that had actually caused her. She's like, no, I'm fine. And I'm like, but you're not. And we found out that it was the criticism of the parents going in like these little tiny drops in the bucket that were winding her up like a spring, until then she'd have these explosions. And she was like, oh my God, I didn't realize that was as traumatic as it was. And I said, it doesn't mean your parents weren't loving or, beautiful people or wanted the best for you. They were doing the best for you they could. They were loving. My parents were completely loving. They loved me like nobody else. And also that church-based, tightly bound, this is your narrow, I guess,
way of living. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, way of living and acceptable behavior.
Yeah. And you had to be perfect. You felt like you had to fit into that mold. And, autoimmune disease is actually, the emotion attached to that is self-criticism or even external criticism. So so when we do applied kinesiology, I know there's several different techniques, and we don't have to be in the physical presence of someone when we're doing it, because it's all energy based. Yes. I kind of, the way I explain it is it's like a Wi-Fi or a Bluetooth, it's like, you're like, okay, you pick up your cell phone. I'm calling you on my cell phone and you pick up yours, and we make a connection. And then you go in and you start, doing the muscle testing or the applied kinesiology. So rather than us going into all the different types of, kinesiology, let's talk about the things that we can tune into when we are using kinesiology. So I know I work oftentimes with the emotional body. So what are some other things, Amanda, that you work with people on to get in there to find the root cause of the issue?
Yeah, absolutely. And that was exactly what I was going to say. When you go to a doctor or another therapist, they're working in symptoms. So they want to know what your symptoms are, and they want you to not have the symptom. So if you think about the loop you work from, somebody goes, you've got these, symptoms. So you've got diabetes. Well, why do I have diabetes? Because you've got these symptoms. Well, why do I have these symptoms? Because you've got diabetes. It's like this loop. And it's a closed loop. Nobody gives a crap about what's actually causing it. Now, what I want to find is what was the stress trigger that caused that diabetes to be presented? Because you could have the genetic code that says you are likely to get diabetes, but unless something actually flips that switch, it won't happen. It's like all those people that went out after Angelina Jolie had her test for the breast cancer and everything. And all these women were then going out and getting mammogram, what do you call it? Mastectomies? Yeah, I can't think. It's too early. My tongue's not working.
And they were in fear,
And you're going, hang on a minute, but unless a stress trigger flips that switch, you may not have it. And you're mute, and I'm not judging anybody who did it, but it's that lack of education that then came with it. It was all done from, as you say, the fear base. Whereas, if we can look after our body, and I always figure and I haven't worked it out for everything, but I always figure if that switch was flipped on, surely there is a way to switch it off again.
Oh, completely.
So,
It's figuring out when did it switch on,
yes.
what age, what time,
Yep.
when did it switch on? And let's go back and talk about what did your life look
Yeah.
like at that time when that
And I
switch was
think
turned on.
it's also looking at the myriad of switches that were switched on. So obviously we've got to go through those different switches and turn some off so that we can find the original switch. So again, people think it can be done in a session. It can't be. It's like you've taken 40 odd years to create this. We're not going to do it in an hour. Sorry, honey.
It's like
And
an
people
onion.
sometimes
Yeah.
come and expect me to, do it in an hour. And I'm like, well, darling, this is, 40 odd years of layered stress. You think of that sedimentary rock where you can see all the layers, often by the seaside. And so that's what you've got in your body. I'm not going to be able to break that down and excavate that in an hour,
And
as
it's
much as
almost
I'd
like,
love to.
yeah, you find one switch and then you turn that off, but then it kind of brings up another switch for you.
Yeah,
It's like, okay,
exactly.
so it's like
Yeah.
layers of an onion, peeling them
Yep.
away, getting
Yeah.
down to that meat. And our healing, it's just, it goes through
Yeah.
so many layers. And when we're working with physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, etheric,
Yes.
auric, all these different
Yeah.
bodies, you're like,
Yeah.
this is infinite, but
Yeah.
it's really just getting to the point, because oftentimes when it manifests physically, it was already there in the emotional body, the energetic body, a long
Exactly.
time ago. So it's
Exactly. And we ignore those signs. And again, that comes back to us ignoring that internal truth because we've been taught. I mean, when we're looking at, the masculine, feminine stuff, obviously, I'm not talking about gender here. It's the archetypal
yep,
masculine, feminine. So, and I need to
the
say that these
energy.
days.
Mhm.
So, masculine, you think of the traditional male sex organs, they're out there, they're projective, they're seen. So, anything that is external is the masculine. So, that giving is a outgoing thing. Receiving is internal. In breath, feminine. Out breath, masculine. So again, you look at the feminine sex organs inside, hidden. They're mysterious. You don't know about them. You kind of got to go, play
Go
around with them a
within.
bit
Mhm.
to work them out. And so again, you look at that masculine feminine principle. And what we're so used to doing, we've been taught that all of the masculine stuff is great and you need to do more of that. You need to give and you need to project and you need to
Function.
do
Mhm.
and you need to strive. And then the feminine, you're lazy because you're just being or
Or
you're
weak.
not doing enough. Yeah, weak, absolutely. And there's this really negative thing about most of that feminine aspect. And so also a lot of what I'm doing is getting people more in touch with those more feminine parts. And again, everybody has them and everybody displays their own balance, the way they need to. For me, I'm most in balance when I'm showing about 40% of that masculine aspect and about 60% of the feminine. Everyone will have their own idea of what's what, but I need to be more than I'm doing. And so, it's also finding that flow for you and how it works, but listening to that internal truth, because again, it's that more feminine thing. What's going on inside me? What can I not see? And we ignore that because the outside is bright lights and flashing and
Oh, it's
exciting
right
and
there.
moving
Yeah.
and it screams really
It's
loudly.
distracting.
Hell yes. And because we're built to move at walking pace and we're flying through the world at 60, 80, 100K an hour and, bright lights and noises and constant inputs happening. And we're not going on that internal thing. And that's why that back to nature is so big right now, because people are realizing they need to start unplugging.
Mhm.
And this is some of that balance that's creating that. And so we're going from, we shout over that quiet internal voice because it is quiet, unless it was literally the universe smacking me down going, you will not take,
You can't
those
get out of bed. You're not moving.
antidepressants, it tends to be a lot quieter. It's a little whisper, a rustle, and so because unless we're slowing down, we often can't hear it. Mine's gotten louder because I listen to it.
Absolutely. And it
And I'm
does.
used to,
Mhm.
I'm used to now more blocking out that external noise. But in the beginning, it was quiet and it was like, was that it?
Uh-huh.
Huh. Okay, give it to me again because I'm now listening.
You're like, I need a couple more signs to let me know that that's you in there, And I think, especially when you're in a relationship that was kind of abusive like yours and mine,
Yeah.
and they're barking in your ear nonstop, it's really hard to tune into your inner voice because you have an
Yeah.
external influence constantly telling you what you should be doing, what you're doing
Yeah.
wrong, being critical, being judgmental, and it's hard to tune that out.
Yeah.
And so, I know for me, I've used applied kinesiology in so many ways. I use
Oh.
it when I'm at the grocery store. Will this food benefit me? Will this supplement
Mm.
benefit me? And I'll literally hold the supplement and just muscle test. And
Yeah.
and I know there's been also too with my energy. Okay, I'll feel great. I leave the house and then I feel crappy when I come home. I'm like, all right, is this my energy or someone else's that I picked up? And
Yeah.
I'll literally muscle test that and say, okay, I picked something else. Now, had I had this in my marriage, or had you had this knowledge in
Oh,
our marriage, we would have totally had a completely different,
do you
I'm sure,
know?
situation or experience. But there's a reason we both went through those,
Oh,
unfortunately, to get us to where we
100%.
needed to be, right?
Well, because I mean, I love, talking about that empath aspect. And these are a couple of things that I recognized with the empath thing. And I've heard it and I'm like, oh my God, mind blown. Empaths often become empaths because they usually grow up in some kind of traumatic environment where they are watching for the behaviors pre-explosion to stop the explosion. So
Yes.
again, my mum had some hormonal issues and so would sometimes would explode around that time of the month. Now I was the same because I had the same thing. So I've passed on the same trauma to my children. Again, no blame. It was hormones. I really couldn't help it at the time. And so, I at least now know about it so I can help my children.
Yeah.
But when I was little, I'd find that really terrifying. And so I was constantly watching for those little behaviors so that I could hopefully stop it by being a really, really extra good girl so that my mum wouldn't explode at me, because I'd find that really terrifying and scary. Now, if I could catch it soon enough, I could potentially divert it. That was what I thought.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, my mum couldn't control it. Good grief, no. She was in terror. I having gone through it myself, I now understand it. But of course, I was understanding it at 35, 45.
Yeah. And as a
I'm not
child,
45,
that's
but
scary, when you're experiencing that, your parents
yeah.
going through something,
And again, like I say, there's no blame there.
No.
She was doing the best she could, and she was such a loving mum and so much fun. So again, like I say, I just want to really pre-frame that, by the way.
It's all about our programming. Yeah.
Yeah. And so again, you're looking at that. And so a lot of empaths actually learn to read that behavior because of that. And so it's not that we're picking up the energy. And this again is something that I was listening to Wayne Dyer and it blew my mind because it puts me in a seat of power. So I'm always looking for a way that I can be in power with my energy, with my life, because I felt so disempowered for so long.
Yeah.
Hang on one sec.
Mm-hmm.
Pardon me. It was only listening to it the other day and I'm like, oh my God, why did I not work that out? It's not necessarily that we're picking up other people's energy. We're matching other people's energy.
Yeah, we're harmonizing. I call it frequency matching. We're harmonizing that other energy. Absolutely.
Exactly. But in using that phrase that we're picking up other people's energy, we are disempowering ourselves because, oh, well, I had no choice over that. Whereas if we're saying, well, hang on, I matched that energy, so there was a bit of choice in there. So now how do I choose to shift out of that? Very different conversation.
Absolutely. And
I guess such a small 100%.
Shift. And I think when I said pick up, that was my younger version of myself, where now it's like that I'm not, no, I'm in my own sovereignty and my energy. And I am not, allowing myself to do that. And it is too, there's a reason why we feel that way, because there's something within us that needs to be healed, that's matching, that like a magnet.
100%.
Like, oh, I thought I healed that.
But I love that you slipped into that terminology because it's so important. And like I say, it's only been reminded to me in the last couple of days, and I'm like, oh my God, I've been using that terminology too, because I hadn't remembered to keep using the terminology that keeps me in power. And I think this is the beauty of the words that we're using, is because it does make the difference between us being a victim or us being in control 100%. And in power of our own lives. And I think, being as cognizant as we can for it. So another word that I'm practicing with at the moment, there's a couple of them, but I try and use and rather than but, because if you notice any sentence with but, we'll often go into justifications and excuses.
Uh-huh.
But also understanding. If I understand you, that actually comes from that courtroom situation where you are standing under the judge and yes, I understand. You are submitting your authority to somebody else. Now, as people pleasers and as empaths, often what we do is we put ourselves on an inferior spectrum, we put everybody else up on a superior one. So anyone who's trying to please anybody else already has this power differential of the other person having power over them. So I must please them to get back on an even keel. And so when we're thinking about that power differential, I never want to understand anybody again. I will comprehend you.
Yeah.
But I will not understand you because I will not submit my authority to you. I will not submit my sovereignty to you. And it feels like a very simple thing, but we're looking at power we want power with other people. You know, you and I working in the same field, we're not competing for clients. We've each got our own client base. We've each got our own way of working. We've each got enough clients. And everybody in the world, by the way, has enough clients that are their perfect match of client. Someone will come to me and think I am a shit kinesiologist, because they just don't resonate with me. And kinesiology is just, you know, weird woo-woo crackpot stuff or whatever. And they'll go to you and go, oh my God, it was amazing. And I had the best time.
All frequency.
And, you know, because it's all about frequency and who we vibrate with and all that sort of stuff. But we want to go, you are still a sovereign being. We're all on the same level. We're all equal. You know, babies can teach me as much as old people can teach me, as much as you can teach. You know, we can all learn. And so if we start to think of this power with, and everybody has skills that we can learn from, then all of a sudden we're taking out this need to people please, because we're not putting that power differential in there. We're not standing under anybody else. We're standing with, and we're having that raising tide raises all the boats kind of scenario, rather than I'm going to push you down so that I can survive.
Exactly. Which is that masculine, that patriarchal energy that we have been kind of programmed in society, that you have to win, or you have to be above everyone, or you have to compete, and, you know, all of that. So it's really just learning how to balance out the feminine and the masculine energies and having that harmonization. And so, and I'll say that with people, it's like, if I may not be resonating with what they say, or they may not be resonating with what I say. And I'm like, well, how can we harmonize this? You know, where's the harmony or the balance that we can both see? Because it's obvious that we're on different frequencies, you know, and I think we get caught up in the high vibe and low vibe, but it's really not that, because that's the linear third dimensional way of looking at it, right? It's more expanded or restricted is the way I kind of look at it, you know, and
we're not just high vibe, low vibe, or yes, no, black, white, whatever, because we need the lower vibrations, because we need to connect to the earth, and the earth vibrates at 7.83 hertz usually. You know, we need that lower vibration within us to connect to the earth, and we need the higher vibration within us to connect to our divinity. We actually, and that's why our lower chakras resonate slower than our higher chakras. And people want to spend their time in the upper ones because they're awesome and they feel heady and fun and it's amazing. But if we're not anchoring into this 3D reality, I feel like our work is completely groundless. And so, and I keep saying to people, we need to bring that high vibration down and push it into the earth so that we are anchored, you know, plugged in either end like a battery. So we're not using our energy, we're using source energy from Mother Earth and from Father Sky to be able to really charge our bodies up. And if we can get into that sort of space, you know, if I'm in that space working, I can do 6 clients a day, not have an issue. Back to back,
feeling rejuvenated and recharged versus drained and exhausted. Absolutely. I feel the same way, because, and you're also doing something that you enjoy doing as well, which just in itself will fuel you, you know?
Absolutely. So I think, you know, and again, we get so used to, as you say, that black and white thinking, because that's the way the brain works. And this is where, you know, people sort of think our subconscious is between our ears. Our subconscious is in every cell of our body. It is in every, you know, energy molecule in our auric fields, our chakra system. It is in every bit of us as our subconscious memory. And this bit between our ears wants to silo everything into black, white, right, wrong, yes, no, because the way that it works is to keep us safe. There are 2 options. And of course, I'm going back to the ancient way that we were built originally, by the way. This is not the culturally appropriated, use of tribe. But we are either accepted by our tribe or we are cast out into the wilderness to die. So the very basic of every single one of our behaviors is so that we are accepted by our tribe. Even those unacceptable behaviors we do because at some point we got attention, or it kept us safe, or it fueled us in some way. It kept us included. So even those socially unacceptable behaviors, even when kids are stealing, they're doing it to get that attention or whatever it is. And even adults who steal or whatever, or break the law, are doing it to get attention. Now, that's because they want to be belonging to that tribe, because otherwise they're going to be cast out into the wilderness and die. Because we could not survive back in those ancient times without that safety of numbers, the safety of the tribe, because we have predators out there. And that's the way our brain is still wired. And so that's what I mean when I'm not saying that culturally appropriated term of tribe, because I'm not trying to, talk about a girl gang tribe or anything like that. It's very much into that bodily physiology of how we were built. And so, everything we're doing, all of my still shitty behaviors are because at some point they kept me safe, they kept me alive, and they allowed me to grow up to be a 44-year-old woman. I needed that.
It's
at some point.
Yeah.
And now I've realized, oh, hang on, I'm going back and getting my tools from, I use the analogy of when my son was little, he had this little collared shirt and little dungarees and looked super cute. And he'd go and get his Fisher-Price toolkit. Other brands are available, by the way, to do like jobs when I was doing jobs around the house. So if I had the electric drill out, he'd go and get his little plastic drill. The way I look at my unresourceful behaviors is I am that little boy carrying that Fisher-Price toolkit thinking he's really helping mummy with the jobs.
Yeah.
And so when, if I'm around my parents or my partner or a client or anybody who is being unresourceful, or myself, it helps me bring out empathy and compassion, because I'm like, you're going back to that pre-programmed childhood behavior and you're bringing it into your adult self. And we all do it because that's conditioning and behavior, as we've said. But what happens then is I can bring out compassion, because my toddler didn't know any better. He didn't know he wasn't actually helping with all those tools.
Just wanted to be with
doing an amazing job. Yeah. And so it's my way then of being able to go, this is how you bring out that compassion. And I will often visualize them. I will get an image of them in that same outfit. Like, it's crazy, but I see them in the outfit with that toolkit. And so, the difference is I know that everything that I could use to build a massive, incredible castle is at the hardware store. Now, I don't know how to use all of those tools yet, and I don't know quite how to build that castle, but I'm willing to learn. And I want to learn how to use more and more different things all the time. Now, some people will see that hardware store and go, that's not for me, and keep driving. Other people will go, well, that's interesting, but I'm not going in. And that's the pill taking. Others will kind of see it and keep driving. Others will go in and go, well, I like this little section or this little section or this little section. But you know what? If I handed power tools to my 18-month-old, he'd have damaged himself.
Of course. He wasn't ready for it.
And that's what I look at. And that's kind of the analogy I use for people who are either ignoring that the work is out there, or doing a bit of the work, or spiritual bypassing, or whatever they're doing, whichever aspect they're doing. That's the analogy I use. These tools aren't for everybody. And people will find different ways of using the tools, or creative ways of using the tools, or whatever it is. And this is why there's so many modalities out there, because different people have taken the tools and built different things with it.
Absolutely.
And so this, and when you start thinking of it in that way, you're taking the judgment off of those people who are acting unresourcefully, and you're able to bring out the empathy and compassion. Okay, you just like the gardening section, fine, go mad. You just like the paints, fine, go mad. You want to go use the power tools? I think you might need a few lessons first.
Yeah, and that's where kinesiology fits in. It's one of those tools in your toolbox that you can take it or leave it, whether and I've had a lot of clients. I've try to teach them kinesiology and they're like, oh, I'm just blocked. I just can't do it. And I go, well, that's your belief that you're blocked, because I went through that too. When
and
I
by the way,
first
we can
started
clear
doing
that.
it. Yeah. I'm like, let's clear that, because it's really just trusting your internal guidance system when you're working with kinesiology, and just really, utilizing it. And it's really having a relationship with yourself, with your subconscious mind. And not everybody's ready for that yet. Like your son, he wasn't ready for the big boy power tools, but he was ready for the training wheels, is kind of what I call them, and getting there.
Exactly.
Well, so Amanda, this has been a great conversation, and I usually keep my shows around 45 minutes or so. So I want people to be able to reach out to you. So where can they connect with you, and where can they find your book? Tell us a little bit about that too.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that my book is on Amazon Kindle. It is also through, I think in the States, it's Barnes & Noble and Amazon. There might be a couple of other places that have the physical book. I also have the physical book on my own website, www.amandakate.com.au. So the book is Divine.Messy.Human. It's a spiritual guide to prioritizing internal truth over external influence. So again, I talk about some of those kinesiology techniques. There isn't a lot of my story in it because, again, as I said to you, my story is interesting because it's mine, and other people will resonate with it because they've had similar experiences. So, and so many of us go through this because of that cultural conditioning. We were grown to believe that external influence is more important than ourselves. So this is really about tuning back in and how we do that, some of the tools that we can use to do that, how we can learn to name our emotions, for example, and balance those opposing principles of masculine and feminine, and, getting used to that idea of paradox as well. Instead of having black and white, well, what about the rest of the Pantone chart and the grayscale?
Yeah, exactly.
Let's bring in a bit more of that. So, and being able to hold multiple things as true at the same time. I can hold the fact that my husband and I had a massively toxic relationship, and I do not condone his behavior in that. And I can still love him as a soul being and as a human and as a man who was doing the best he could with the tools he had.
Absolutely.
And so I can hold those two as true, and they sit comfortably with me. Now, he will still do some behaviors that I'm like, oh, have you not learned? But at the same time, I'm like, well, if he was a different man, we might still be married, So again, I can love him for who he is. And so there's that sort of thing that I also talk about. So yeah, but if you go to my website, there's most of the links to my socials. I think the only link that's not there is my TikTok, which is at Divinely.Messy. Okay. But I'm just playing on there anyway. So.
Yeah, I hear you. That's fun. Well, Amanda, I appreciate you coming on today and being very vulnerable with sharing your story. I know that's not always easy. And, I give you a lot of kudos for what you're doing and being out there. We are kind of paving a new way to healing, from what we've been conditioned and programmed to believe in, So I give you a lot of credit. And thank you for the energy that you're putting out into the world. And I just appreciate you for coming on the show today. Thank you so much.
Oh, look, and thank you for bringing your work to the world. We need more and more people healing those traumas, because every single person who heals those traumas is that, stone in the pond, and their ripple effect will ripple out, And so I really appreciate you bringing all this work to the world as well, because we need it.
We do. Thank you so much, Amanda.
Thank you.
You deserve to navigate your life as an empath in alignment with health, happiness, and abundance. To learn more about the services that I provide, including Beyond Quantum Healing Hypnosis, EFT Tapping, and the Emotion Code, visit my website at www.thesoulcafe.org.